The story of the IS tank family started in 1942 when a team of armor design engineers in Chelyabinsk began to work on a new heavy tank. The idea was to create a vehicle boasting both the mobility of a medium tank and the firepower of a heavy tank. Only a year later, Soviet engineers built the first prototype based on the design of heavy tanks of the KV series. That was the Object 237, with 100mm and 120mm thick armor plates in the front, a 520 horsepower engine, an upgraded transmission, and an 85mm gun. When the new tank was approved for production, it was given the name of IS, the acronym being the anglicized initials of Joseph Stalin. The first tank of the series, the IS-1, was armed with a quick-firing D5T cannon that came with a really good selection of ammunition, including 2 different APHE rounds. The first has an explosive mass of more than 70 grams of TNT equivalent, the second more than 160 grams. These rounds are best used at medium range, and that's where you'll get most of the tank's armor as well. Try not to engage targets at long distance. It'll be much harder to penetrate their defenses, while most enemies will still be able to damage your vehicle. At the same time, the first IS doesn't have enough armor to engage in CQC. On the other hand, if everything goes pear-shaped, the IS-1 won't have much difficulty disengaging. The vehicle is extremely mobile and reaches a speed of up to 16 kph when going in reverse. That's twice as fast as the Tiger and 4 times faster than the Panther. But just as the first IS tanks were rolling off the factory floor, Soviet engineers were already thinking about giving it a bigger gun, as its 85mm cannon was clearly struggling to pierce the frontal defenses of German Ferdinands and Panthers. A few different options were considered at the time, including a mortar gun. But in the end, the next model was fitted with a long-barrel cannon based on the heavy-hitting A-19 field gun. Thanks to a number of clever engineering solutions, including the implementation of an effective muzzle recoil compensator, it all went smoothly, and the new model, called the IS-2, got its iconic 122mm cannon. In the game, this gun is very dangerous, regardless of what vehicle you're currently using. When 200 grams of explosive filler go boom, that's either a KO in a single hit, or, even if the tank itself stays mostly intact, a swift ticket to heaven for all your crew members. With a gun like that, engaging at range is no longer a problem. But be wary of CQC. The gun doesn't have the best elevation depression angles, and it takes more than 20 seconds to reload. Well, that wasn't it, though. The Soviet engineers kept on upgrading the design. During the summer 1944, tankers of the Red Army got a new version of the IS-2 featuring a heavily sloped armor plate, giving it significantly more protection in the front. This model was generally known as the IS-2 Mod 1944. Apart from the ordinary IS-2, in War Thunder, there are also a few tank destroyers built on its chassis. The ISU-122 and the ISU-152, as well as a premium historical IS-2 that bears the inscription, "Revenge for the Hero Brother." Mikhail Krasikov was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union posthumously. After his brother's death, Mikhail Krasikov inscribed "Revenge for the Hero Brother" on his own tank and fought in it until almost the end of the war. Okay, moving on. The IS-6 was a result of an effort to rework the IS-2 design from the ground up. The tank got a new hull with heavily sloped armor, a 700 horsepower engine, and a D-30 cannon that uses unitary rounds, allowing for a much faster reload. The team behind the project also wanted to outfit it with an experimental electrical transmission, but the project was halted before the design was approved for production. In the game, The IS-6 is a gift tank with a conventional mechanical transmission. It's highly mobile and has decent armor. Keep in mind, though, that due to an increase in BR, it will sometimes run into enemies with access to post-war heat rounds, which is not a very favorable match, let's put it this way. The legendary IS-3 is something you get when there are two teams of talented engineers trying to create a completely new tank design. Most notably, the teams gave the vehicle its distinctive upper front part of the body dubbed pike nose and a hemispherical bowl-shaped turret. This is a really well-protected vehicle. Even APF-STS rounds have difficulty piercing its turret, not to mention that it still has enough firepower and mobility to make its predecessors proud. The IS-4 was a result of yet another attempt to create a viable, heavily armored tank. It has up to 160 millimeters of armor on the sides and more than 200 millimeters armor around its turret. This 60-ton beast, though, is still pretty mobile, thanks to a 750 horsepower diesel engine and a brand new transmission. When this tank just came out, it was so well protected that most of its contemporaries wouldn't even be able to scratch it. But the crazy pace of the arms race meant that it was very quickly succeeded by much better designs. In the game, the tank relies heavily on its armor. It is sloped at favorable angles, allowing it to bounce a lot of enemy shots. And if you're good at positioning your vehicle and covering your most vulnerable spots, then this tank can be very hard to take out. On the other hand, its gun doesn't always pack enough punch to deal with your opponents and has a painfully slow reload. The last tank in this video is the IS-7, the most advanced model of the series and one of the most fearsome designs of its time. Its gun comes with an autoloader, giving it a reload speed of only 10 seconds, which is very impressive given that we're talking about 130mm gun here. The tank is also fitted with a 12-cylinder diesel engine derived from a naval marine engine used on fast offshore boats, giving the IS-7 a max speed of 60 kilometers an hour. Moreover, the frontal armor turned out to be so well designed that even another IS-7 would have difficulty piercing it. In the unlikely scenario, two of those had to clash in combat. In other words, after many years of trial and error, the team behind the project finally succeeded in realizing the dream behind the very first IS. They made a vehicle that had firepower of a heavy, but was as mobile as a medium tank. Sadly, the prototype was still too damned heavy. The Soviet military were reluctant to use a giant weighing almost 70 tons, and the vehicle never made it past the prototype stage. It's not that all that work was in vain, though. The experience of designing the IS-7 turned out to be very handy when the Soviets made the T-10, the last Soviet heavy that was in production for more than 10 years and finished its service long after the dissolution of the Soviet Union.